Kit, there's another fairly hot theory, line of questions that our members have a great interest in. And this is relevant to the, apparently in New Mexico, there was a lab, a U.S. government, highly secured lab, that had a sample of the 1976 flu. They transferred that down to a lab in Mexico. And apparently, that sample wasn't secured properly. Nobody really knows what happened, but it got out. It got out into the public. And amazingly enough, shortly thereafter, that incident, President Obama, newly elected President Obama, was down in Mexico, shakes hands with what everyone believes was the first casualty of this latest H1N1 flu virus. So one of the conspiracy theories is that, through this action, be it negligence or intended action, there was an attempt on the newly elected president's life by releasing this flu. Your thoughts on that?
A couple points on that you raised. I think that the idea that there was an attempt on President Obama is not a supportable idea. And we can talk about it if you want, but I think that it's not supportable because it's just not the way the biology works. And it is just not sensible, given the first part of your question, which is very sensible. And that is, yes, I think it, although I don't know the details of the shipment that you referred to, what I do know, which I think a lot of members in your forum don't understand, is that there are probably thousands, not ones and twos and threes and fours. There's probably thousands of shipments of these organisms back and forth around the world, from lab to lab, university to university, all the time, in and out of the country. And I don't have any problem believing that in the pharmaceutical domain that doesn't happen all the time. And in fact, it has to happen. That's the way science is done. That's the way that the various strains are looked at. We've already said earlier in this discussion that in terms of this flu, there's 6 varieties of the flu. There's 8 sets of genes that are in it, that are involved. There's 3 that are associated with one kind of distribution and 5 of the other of the 8. If you start looking at mathematical probabilities, you get really confused very quickly. And the thought that somebody did something with that specific strain is just scientifically not defensible. The fact that the strain got down there, it might have gotten out and infected people and started what we have as now the H1N1 is absolutely a reasonable hypothesis. That's what we think happened as a result of the episode that we talked about earlier after Fort Dix, and then the year after when the vaccinations began to occur in the United States. That's probably what happened. It's the reassortment of these viruses moving from lab to lab that usually are the reasons why these things get out, and I think that's sensible. But no, I don't think that there was a plot, because there's no need to have a plot. There's so much reasonable cause for that to have occurred.
The other aspect of this same theory, the other side of it, is some dark, clandestine, black operative, off-budget, unknown to the public intelligence group, country of origin or countries of origin unknown, potentially intercepted that shipment, released it into the Mexican tourist area just before spring break, when there are literally hundreds of thousands of U.S. college students, high school students, families enjoying the beautiful climate and gorgeous waters of the Caribbean Sea, in order to track how a bioweapon or a pandemic might actually spread. So to sum that up in simple terms, the dirty, dark intelligence guys, released this on purpose, intercepted the shipment in Mexico, released it on purpose so they could watch and determine if a bioterror weapon or an NWO, population reduction weapon, in the form of a flu, would work.
I read that material, and I think it's really interesting, and I've got probably three things about it to say. First is I've already not only admitted, I've indicated that with some degree of pride, I spent the first third of my career trying to look at intelligence data that might indicate that bad guys were trying to hurt people in the United States from countries that we then knew wanted to do things like that. So I'm not opposed to the concept that bad guys can't do things like that. Second, in this case, it would have been a really dumb thing for any clandestine group to do. And we know there are some dumb clandestine operatives. There's no question about that. We've seen plenty of examples of that. But when you're talking about this sort of a conspiracy that would have had to have included some pretty sophisticated dumb people, there just isn't any reason for me to imagine that, because the experiment wouldn't have worked. And if they were smart enough to know how to do what it was that the conspiracy theorists think were done, they should have been smart enough to know it wouldn't have worked. And that's the third thing I want to say. The reason that it wouldn't have worked is because of the reporting artifacts. There's no way that people in that circumstance could be tracked. Arithmetic could have been done. Models with the numbers, the small numbers, even with a lot of kids down there for spring break, would have been sufficient to do the math to be able to rigorously tell what you suggested and other people have suggested would be the motive. So that's, I think, my summary of that. I think that that conspiracy line I don't buy into, because none of it makes any sense.
Well, another and fairly, really nasty society, from a society perspective, this one's really ugly, kid. But there's another story out there that in Germany specifically and other wealthy EU nations, there was actually two different recipes of vaccine. And if you were a government leader or a wealthy industrialist or someone in the higher end of society, you got the nice clean vaccine that apparently didn't have the dirty little bits in it that may cause the side effects that everyone's concerned about. And if you weren't an industrial magnate or a political leader or a wealthy person in general, you got kind of the dirty vaccine that maybe wasn't as clean. Now, you know, that's kind of been reported on and true. And that's really a dirty deal, and that's a genuine conspiracy. And as a doctor, what's your take on that?
I don't know the real details of that other than having superficially read about it. But the answer is that's, if it's true, a highly unethical action. But it is unethical in two dimensions. One is it's unethical to give the vaccine to a special population. And in fact, it's not only unethical, it's just sick to do that. My immediate reaction is I don't have the data to think that's true, and it is eminently checkable. The people who are the recipients of what are the stories of the clean vaccine include people from the extreme left and the extreme right, of which there's undoubtedly hundreds, that would just love to have a private investigator take their blood, take it to a laboratory, do some sequence analyses, and determine whether or not they did or didn't get the epitope and the right kind of antigen-antibody reaction that would support the hypothesis that you said. So once again, we get back to, you don't have to believe what I say. I mean, I'm saying I don't think I believe that because it sounds really dumb and stupid, and also, by the way, it's so unethical. I don't know anybody in the vaccine programs that are that evil that would do something like that. If they did, it's just terrible. But it's checkable. It's not anything we have to have as an enduring mystery. From a scientific perspective, I don't think it's true, but I have already said I'm not a virologist, and I've already said that I am not a molecular biologist, And I've already said that virology and molecular biology of this stuff is more complicated than building a nuclear weapon. So I'm basically saying I can't say that it's not possible. But what I can say is there's not a shred of evidence that I've ever seen scientifically from somebody that is qualified to make those statements.
Okay, Kit, straight up question. Have you been vaccinated, and are you recommending your family to be vaccinated, and are you recommending that your patients get vaccinated?
The first part of that question and my answer is easier to answer than the second part. The first part is no, I have not been vaccinated because I am not part of the population that is suggested be vaccinated. Given the amount of vaccine that's available, it wouldn't be ethical for me to do it. I don't deal directly with patients on a day-to-day basis sufficiently that I think that a dose should be reserved for myself. And so, no, I haven't. The answer, the second one, is I have been pretty strict with my family, my children, and my friends and patients that are clients and patients in saying that they should stick to the rules. That is, if they're part of a population that is a population at risk, they should indeed be vaccinated. That includes children that have a proclivity for respiratory illness. And in that case, I'm very insistent that they be vaccinated only if they take the shot as opposed to the mist inhalation, and that they admit that they will get, if they are not in that population, but a child or a pregnant woman, and they take the mist, that they agree that they will do 2 doses 28 days apart. And other than that, I suggest that they not, if they are more concerned about the 1 in 100,000 case that they might get Guillain-Barré versus the fact that they would be the 1 in 2,000 if they got the flu instead and would become deathly sick, and 1 out of 4,000 that may die. And in that case, what I tell people, if they won't get their children vaccinated or they don't get themselves vaccinated, they have to be willing. I understand they're not wanting to get the vaccine because of the risks we just mentioned. They have to be willing to isolate themselves and their children as maximally, as much as possible from crowds, from trains, from planes, from school circumstances, from gymnasiums, from contact sports. And if they're willing to do that, I'll support them.
Getting back to my question a little bit ago, relative to the media overhyping the swine flu, the H1N1, throwing out words like pandemic and not defining them. There's another theory that's making the rounds, and this one is really nefarious, but not as evil, in execution. And this theory is that, the terror scare and the fears of straight out terrorism have kind of waned. So the mainstream media, in collusion with the government, needed something else to frighten us all with, to keep us all, dependent on the government to watch over us and to take care of us. And this pandemic presented them with a golden opportunity to do just that. So the theory is that the government, in collusion with the mainstream media, have really partnered to scare the pants off the American public, because the terror thing has really kind of died down, and the H1N1 virus and this swine flu pandemic is the perfect scary thing to throw at us. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's absolutely true. I think that there are many constituencies that have overrepresented all kinds of threats that relate to national security. I don't think it's just this circumstance. I don't think that the constituencies are necessarily, though, primarily located in the government. I think it's primarily constituencies that are located in the private sector who sell to the government services and products that are related to maintaining this concern. And you don't have to believe me. It's not my data. Just have somebody pull up the number of lobbyists in Washington, D.C. that represent small to large corporations, 3-person corporations, 3,000, 30,000 person corporations who make a living, and by the way, hire us, a lot of us in the United States, to make a living working for them based on products and services that are related to what it is that's important. And if you take a look at the quality of the media writing on this, you'll also see that it's the easiest thing to write about, and every new graduate journalism student that goes to work for any newspaper or any magazine writes about this stuff because it's cheap, it's easy, they don't have to defend it, they don't have to have any data, they can just wax eloquently about how these people are all trying to make money off of our fears. That's absolutely right, they are.